The smell of death isn't what you think. It's not just decay, it's the suffocating scent of industrial-grade bleach trying to hide the smell of unwashed skin and abandoned hope. I sat by the window of my new world, watching a single crow pick at a discarded bandage in the parking lot. I am Samuel Thorne, 78 years old, and for 40 years I was a master locksmith. I knew the weight of brass, the intricate dance of tumblers, and the click of a bolt sliding home. I knew how to secure a perimeter and how to keep the world out, but I never realized that the most dangerous intruder was already inside my own home, eating at my dinner table. "Dad, you're doing it again," Greg had said, his voice dripping with that sticky, artificial concern. "You're staring into space." "I took the ones you gave me, Greg," I replied, my voice sounding thin to my own ears. "I'm just thinking about the garden." "Linda already took care of the garden, Dad," he said, not looking at me. He was busy looking at a real estate app on his phone, his thumb flicking across the screen with a hunger that made my stomach turn. "Actually, we had the gardener pull the vines. It's too much for you to manage now." "I didn't trip," I whispered. "That's not what Linda saw," he snapped, finally looking up. The mask of the grieving sun slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the cold, impatient predator beneath. "She saw you staggering. She saw you confused." I remember the day they moved me. It was a Saturday, the kind of bright, sun-drenched morning that makes everything seem possible. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one I'd built the frame for in 1985, when Greg and Linda walked in with a stack of papers and a suitcase. They didn't ask, they announced. "Maplewood Manor is a 5-star facility, Samuel," Linda said, her voice like a jagged piece of glass wrapped in velvet. "They have a spa, a library, and 24-hour medical staff." "I don't want a spa," I told them, my hands beginning to shake. "I want my house. I want my shop." "The shop is gone, Dad," Greg said, handing me a heavy fountain pen. It was the pen my wife, Martha, had given me for our 25th anniversary. "I sold the inventory to a collector in the city. It's all taken care of. Now, just sign here. It's for your protection." I looked at the paper, the letters blurring as the first wave of chemical lethargy hit me. They had started supplementing my diet with memory boosters a week prior. I felt like I was moving through waist-deep water. I trusted the blood in Greg's veins. I trusted the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I placed the pen to the paper and signed away 40 years of labor in a single shaky scrawl. The first month at Maplewood was a blur of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic squeak-squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. They put me in room 412. It was beige. Everything was beige. The walls, the curtains, the soul of the people who worked there. Greg and Linda would visit on Sundays, wearing their best clothes and their fakest smiles. They spoke to me in high-pitched voices, the way people talk to dogs or infants. "What do you have?" Linda would ask, her eyes roaming the room to see if I'd hidden anything. "I want to go home," I'd say. "Oh, Samuel, don't be difficult," she'd sigh, looking at her watch. "The house is sold. The new owners moved in yesterday, a lovely young couple with a baby." The pain of that statement was sharper than any knife. My workshop, the place that still smelled of oil and metal and my father's tobacco, erased. As the weeks crawled by, the fog of the medication began to feel different. I realized that if I didn't drink the water immediately after the nurse left, I could tuck the pills under the back of my tongue. I started to wake up in the middle of the night. That's when I saw the truth. I saw the night staff, led by a woman named Gable, going through the drawers of the residence. I saw the way they handled the man in 410, a retired judge who couldn't speak. They weren't caring for us. They were harvesting us. I noticed the bruises on my own wrists first, dark purple thumbprints where someone had helped me down. I had no memory of it. That terrified me more than the thought of dying. My grandson, Leo, was the only one who still looked at me like a man. He was 16, a quiet boy with a penchant for electronics. During a visit where Greg was busy arguing with the billing department, Leo sat by my bed. "Grandpa," he whispered. "You look." "I'm not taking the pills, Leo," I hissed, leaning in close. "Listen to me. I need eyes. I need a way to hear what they say when they think I'm asleep." He looked at me, his eyes wide. He saw the bruises. He saw the desperation.
"A monitor," I said. "Something small. Analog, not the fancy digital ones they can track on the Wi-Fi." A week later, Leo brought me a plastic water pitcher.
It looked identical to the one provided by the facility, but when I picked it up, I felt the slight imbalance in the weight. The base was hollowed out. Inside was a high-sensitivity transmitter. He'd wired the receiver to a small earbud that stayed hidden inside my pillowcase. The wire snaked deep into the foam, where no searching hand would find it. "It's an old baby monitor, Grandpa," he told me, his voice trembling. "I modified the frequency." I sat there in the dark of that cramped room, the static of the monitor buzzing in my ear like a warning. If you've ever looked into the eyes of your own flesh and blood and realized they were waiting for you to stop breathing, hit that subscribe button. You need to hear the recording that turned my heartbreak into a mission for justice. For 3 nights, I heard nothing but the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional moan from the hallway. But on Tuesday, at exactly 2:14 a.m., the speaker in my ear crackled. The heavy door to my room opened with a soft, practiced groan. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing shallow and rhythmic, a trick I'd learned during my service years. A woman's voice, "Gable." "He took the double dose tonight," a man replied. My heart nearly stopped. It was Greg. My son was in my room at 2 in the morning, and he hadn't come to check on me. "Good," Greg said. "I heard the sound of him pacing the small room. The house sale cleared escrow today. The offshore account is ready, but we have a problem. The bank is flagging the secondary transfer from his pension fund." "That's not going to happen," Gable said, her voice cold and transactional. "Look at him. He can barely hold a spoon, let alone a conversation with a bank manager." "Every day," Greg said, "but he's stubborn. He's got that locksmith's brain. He's always trying to find a way out of things. I need this finished, Gable. Linda is breathing down my neck about the Mediterranean trip, and the startup is bleeding cash." "We don't have to wait," Gable replied. "I heard the rustle of fabric, the sound of a medical cart being moved. If we increase the dosage by another 20% over the next week, his heart will just give up. It'll look like he just drifted off." I lay there, my eyes squeezed shut so hard they hurt. Bile rose in my throat, a bitter, stinging liquid. My own son was negotiating the price of my murder. He wasn't just waiting for me to fade away, he was paying a stranger to reach into my chest and stop my heart.
He was liquidating the man who had taught him how to walk, how to drive, how to be a man. "1 week," Greg said. "Do it. I'll bring the final papers tomorrow. After that, I don't care what happens to the body. Just make sure the cremation is done immediately." "Consider it done, Mr. Thorne," Gable said. I heard the door click shut, the lock engaged, the very lock I had taught Greg the mechanics of years ago. I was trapped in a beige box, being fed poison by my own flesh and blood, listening to my death warrant being discussed over the sound of my own ventilator. I waited until I was sure they were gone. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the receiver. My hands were no longer shaking. The chemical fog had been burned away by a cold, crystalline fury. They thought I was a lock that was already broken. They thought they could just walk into the vault and take the gold. But they forgot one thing about a master locksmith. We don't just build locks. We know exactly how to break them. I looked at the water pitcher. The little red light on the transmitter was still glowing, a tiny, angry eye in the darkness. I wasn't going to die in this bed. I wasn't going to let them turn my life into a vacation and a failed startup. I reached out and touched the bruise on my wrist. It throbbed, a rhythmic reminder of the battle I was about to wage. "I'm still here, Greg," I whispered to the empty, bleached bear. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, the static in my ear sounding like a growing storm. I began to plan. I began to remember every bypass, every shim, and every master key I'd ever made. They wanted to erase my mind, but they had only succeeded in sharpening it into a weapon. The moon shifted, casting a long, jagged shadow of the bed rails across the floor. Looking like the bars of a cage, I was finally ready to melt.
I didn't need a key to get out of Maplewood. I needed a masterpiece of justice. The static in the earbud hummed, a low, constant vibration that felt like the heartbeat of the house I was about to bring down. I closed my eyes and focused on the sound of the crow outside, waiting for the morning light to show me the first tumbler I needed to set. The locksmith was awake, and the vault was finally opening. The morning after I recorded my own death warrant, the world looked different.
The sunlight hitting the checkered linoleum floor of my room didn't feel warm or welcoming. It felt like a cold, clinical spotlight focused on a crime scene that hadn't happened yet. I lay perfectly still, my eyes fixed on a water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a skull. I was an architect of silence now, a locksmith who had finally figured out that the most important gate to keep locked was my own expression. When the heavy door groaned open at 7 a.m., I didn't flinch. I let my jaw hang just a fraction too low, a silent invitation for them to see the hollow shell they wanted. "Good morning, Samuel. Time for your vitamins," a nurse said. Her voice was chipper, the kind of professional cheer that never reached the eyes. I turned my head slowly, mimicking the rusted movement of an old machine. "Ugh," I mumbled, making sure to slur the S's. "It's Friday, Samuel." She leaned over me, her breath smelling of peppermint and coffee. I didn't answer. I just opened my mouth, a cavern of feigned emptiness. She placed 2 blue pills on my tongue and held a plastic cup to my lips. I took a swallow of water, but as she tilted the cup, I used my tongue like a master key, expertly sliding both tablets into the pocket of my left cheek. It was a maneuver I had practiced for weeks. I felt the dry, chalky texture of the coating against my gums, but I didn't swallow. I couldn't afford to be a ghost today. I needed to be a man. "Good boy," she cooed, patting my hand. Her touch felt like a cockroach crawling over my skin. "Greg will be so happy to see you looking so." She left, and the lock clicked. I waited 30 seconds, counting the beats of my heart, before I spat the pills into a tissue and hid them inside the hollowed-out leg of my bedside chair. My luck turned an hour later in the communal garden. It was a patch of dying grass and wilted petunias surrounded by a 10-foot chain-link fence, but it was the only place where the air didn't taste like bleach. I sat on a bench, staring at a framed photograph of my late wife, Martha. I was tracing the line of her jaw with my thumb when I felt a presence beside me. "She looks like she was a firecracker," a woman's voice said. I didn't look up immediately. I kept my eyes on Martha. "She was the only person who ever knew how to pick the locks I built," I whispered. The woman sat down. She was in her early 50s, wearing the sharp navy blazer that looked out of place in this graveyard of souls. Her name was Sarah.
She had been visiting her mother in room 414 for 2 weeks, and she was the only person in this building who hadn't spoken to me like I was a broken radiator. "You're not as far away as they think you are, Samuel," she said, her voice dropping to a low, tactical hum. "I saw you in the hallway yesterday. You weren't staring at nothing." I finally looked at her. I saw the clarity in her eyes, a sharp legal mind hiding behind the facade of a grieving daughter. "I spent 40 years making sure things stayed where they were put, Sarah. I was a paralegal for 20 years, she said, leaning closer, her eyes scanning the garden for Gable's orderlies. "I know a captive when I see one. My son is paying them to stop my heart," I said. The words felt heavy, like lead shot in my mouth. "I have a recording. 2 a.m. His voice. Gable's voice." Sarah's face didn't crumble into pity. It hardened into a cold, professional fury that made me realize I had finally found my master key. "Show me," she whispered. I let her listen to the snippet on the receiver I had tucked into my sleeve.
I watched her knuckles go white as she heard Greg discuss the facility fee for my silence. "This isn't just elder abuse," Sarah hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "This is a conspiracy to commit murder. Samuel, you can't stay here another night." "I have no money, Sarah," I said, looking back at Martha's photo. "Greg sold the house. He liquidated the shop." "Not yet," she said. "I have a friend, Marcus. He's a retired investigator who specialized in forensic accounting. If Greg is siphoning your pension, he's leaving footprints. You stay in the fog. Let them think the pills are working." The next few days were an exercise in psychological warfare. I stayed in my glass coffin, staring at the beige walls, letting my jaw go slack whenever Gable entered the room. I listened to her talk about my declining vitals over the phone to Greg, her voice full of a sickening, fake empathy. "He's drifting, Mr. Thorne," Gable said one afternoon, standing right next to my bed. "I think it's time we discuss the final arrangements. The DNR is already on file." A mercy, I thought. The only mercy I want is to see you behind bars. Through Sarah, I made contact with Marcus. He visited as a cousin, sitting by my bed and whispering the progress of the silent war he was waging in the digital shadows. "Your son is a desperate man, Samuel," Marcus told me, his eyes hidden behind dark aviators.
That tech startup of his? It's a black hole. He's lost millions of his own money and most of yours. He's been using Maplewood as a laundromat. Gable gets a cut of the inheritance, and in exchange, she provides the natural causes certificate. But it's deeper, I asked. It gives him total medical and financial control, Marcus said. But the real kicker is the do not resuscitate clause. It wasn't just a medical preference, Samuel. It was a death warrant. Gable has a directive to ignore any cardiac events starting this Saturday. That's their deadline. I looked at Marcus. Exactly, Marcus nodded. Greg wants to be standing on a stage as a self-made billionaire while his father quietly passes in his sleep. He's even got a speech prepared about your legacy. Then we'll give him a legacy he'll never forget, I said. The night before the gala was the longest night of my life. I lay in the dark, the baby monitor receiver pressed against my ear, listening to the silence of the hallways. I felt the PTSD of my wife's long illness clawing at my chest, the memory of feeling helpless as she faded away. But this was different. I wasn't fading. I was a locksmith, and I had finally felt the last tumbler click into place. Sarah and Marcus moved with the precision of a tactical team. At 6 p.m. on Saturday, while the staff was distracted by a shift change and the arrival of a new, high-profile resident, Sarah checked me out for a medical appointment. She didn't even look at the paperwork Sarah presented. She just waved a hand, assuming I was being wheeled off to a hospice consultation. Sarah asked as she pushed my wheelchair toward the exit. "I've been ready for 40 years, I said, my voice finally regaining the gravel and steel of the man I used to be. They took me to a storage unit on the edge of town where Marcus had my old tuxedo waiting. It smelled of cedar and the faint, sweet perfume Martha used to wear. I stood up from the wheelchair, my legs shaky but holding. I looked at myself in a cracked mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a master chief. I saw a man who knew how to secure the truth. The Legacy Gala was held at the Grand Sterling Ballroom, a place of marble floors and gold leaf ceilings that Greg had rented with my pension money. I could see the flashbulbs through the glass doors. I could hear the clinking of champagne glasses, the sound of people celebrating a success built on a foundation of betrayal.
Marcus was already inside, dressed as an AV technician. Sarah walked beside me, her arm linked with mine. "Don't let the noise get to you," she whispered. We entered the ballroom just as Greg was stepping onto the dais. He looked exactly like the man he wanted to be, polished, expensive, and powerful. He held a crystal flute of champagne, his smile wide and practiced. Linda stood beside him, draped in diamonds that I suspected had belonged to Martha. "Ladies and gentlemen," Greg's voice boomed through the speakers. "Today we celebrate the future of Thorne Dynamics. But as we look ahead, I must take a moment to look back. My father, Samuel Thorne, is the reason I am standing here. He is currently battling a cruel illness, but his spirit is the very heart of this company." The room erupted in polite applause. I saw Gable sitting at a front table, nodding like a saint. I didn't wait. I didn't shuffle. I walked down the center aisle, the heels of my polished shoes striking the marble with the rhythm of a ticking clock. The crowd began to murmur, the sea of black ties and evening gowns parting as they realized who was approaching. Greg's smile didn't just fade, it disintegrated. He looked at me as if a corpse had just crawled out of the ground and asked for a drink. He stammered, his voice cracking over the microphone. "What are you? You're supposed to be..." The doctor said I was drifting, Greg," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but Marcus had ensured the microphone on the dais was live. My words echoed off the gold leaf ceiling. "Samuel, you're confused," Linda said, stepping forward, her face a mask of panicked aggression. "You're having an episode. Security." "I've had enough of your medication, Linda," I said, stopping at the foot of the dais. I looked up at my son. "I have a question for you, Greg. Before the investors sign their checks, I want to know about the vacation you planned." A gasp rippled through the room. Greg's face went a sickly shade of gray. "Dad, stop this. You're sick," I asked. I looked at Marcus in the back of the room. He gave me a sharp nod and hit the key on his laptop. The ballroom's massive, state-of-the-art sound system didn't play the upbeat corporate anthem Greg had planned. It crackled with the raw, grainy static of an analog baby monitor. "The dosage isn't high enough," Greg's voice boomed through the room, cold and murderous. The silence that followed was absolute.
It was the kind of silence I used to find in the center of a high-security vault. "Too much too fast to look suspicious to the state board," Gable's voice followed, crisp and transactional. "But for an extra 10%, we can ensure he remains." The recording played for 60 seconds. 60 seconds of my own son and his partner negotiating the price of my life. I watched the judges in the audience stand up. I watched the investors pull their checkbooks back as if they were covered in filth. Gable tried to bolt for the exit, but the police, already briefed by Marcus, were waiting by the mahogany doors. Greg didn't fight. He didn't even move. He just stared at me, the crystal flute slipping from his hand. It shattered on the marble, the champagne soaking into his expensive Italian shoes. There was no lock you could build that I couldn't hear through. "Greg," I said softly. The police moved in, the handcuffs clicking onto Greg's wrists with a sound that felt like the most beautiful music I had ever heard. It was the sound of a bolt, finally, sliding home. I watched as Linda was led away, her screaming protestations falling on deaf ears. I sat back in a velvet chair, feeling the weight of my dignity returning to me. It wasn't about the money Greg had stolen. It was about the fact that I had spoken when they tried to mute me. I had secured my own truth. A week later, I sat on the porch of my house. Sarah had helped me navigate the legal maze to reclaim it from the lovely young couple, who turned out to be another one of Greg's shell companies. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and the roses that Sarah had helped me replant. I looked at the baby monitor sitting on the side table. It was silent now, just a piece of plastic and wire. The sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the lawn. For the first time in months, the only voice I had to listen to was the one inside my own head, telling me that the perimeter was finally, truly, secure. I closed my eyes and let the quiet wash over me, knowing that the only person with the key to my life was me. I picked up the photo of Martha and whispered to the evening air, knowing the static was gone for good.